And welcome to another Tucson Means Business, proudly sponsored by the 49ers Golf and Country Club. The hidden, jewel of the desert that's out there on Tanque Verde Road, right-hand side. And, of course, the infamous grill, the Rincon Grill, serving great meals. Still adhering to all the things you've got to do with mask and spacing, but you can order, take meals away, or go there. And, of course, the golf, and we'll be talking more about that a little bit later on. I'd like to welcome, a sincere welcome, actually, to this episode of Tucson Means Business, to a special guest who is a local radio personality by the name of BEN BUEHLER-GARCIA. You may have heard his shows, maybe not yet, but you will. Welcome, Ben.
Mark, thank you so much for having me on Tucson Business Radio.
Well,
just a couple of immigrants here, huh?
Yeah, right, man. With a name like Buehler-Garcia, I figured there had to be a bit of a mix in there. Maybe, German Spanish? Or what? Mexican Spanish, yeah. Okay, there we go. You're the son of Protestant missionaries raised in Latin America.
Yeah, grew up Mexico and Costa Rica.
I was going to say, whereabouts exactly?
Yeah, mostly in Oaxaca. We spent a lot of time up in the jungle, the villages up in the jungle there in Oaxaca, and then 2 years in San Jose when my folks were at the language school there.
Well, you've come a long way since then.
It was, particularly given what's going on in the world right now with immigration, I'm a little sensitive to that, but
Right.
Came to the United States when I was 9 years old, and it was, even though my folks were U.S. citizens, Mark, from my 9-year-old eyes, America was the land of milk and honey, and I certainly can't fault anyone that wants to come here and make a better life for themselves.
Were you the only child?
No, two other brothers, myself and two brothers.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you got to the States when you were 9 years old?
Correct.
Wow. And I gather it was Tucson?
No. Our first stop was working with the Lakota Sioux up on the reservation in Sioux Falls.
Really?
We spent some time in California, Rockford, Illinois, a couple of places in Arizona.
Right. Well, how come there was through missionaries, your mum and dad were still working?
Correct.
So this is why the move arounds.
Correct. It's talk about military radio. It's I'd like to joke that being in the mission or the pastor field, it's kind of same movement schedule, different general.
And if I haven't, I'm going to be mentioning a lot, but if I haven't, be remiss of me. But Ben is the host of a show called American Warrior Radio.
Correct.
And it's heard here locally on the talk station, KVO, one of the talk stations, KVOI, 10:30 a.m. And it's then, syndicated, isn't it?
Well, we broadcast in Phoenix. We're on the air in Colorado Springs, and we've got 2 stations in Sacramento.
Very good, and it's enjoyed. And you interview basically military and ex-military and people with story backgrounds from military, yes?
Yeah, we like to say we talk about the men and women who protect us at home and abroad. So that's men and women of the military, veterans, first responders, and those that support them.
Yes, first responders, very much so. Now, I gather it was Tucson that you secured your bachelor's degree in public administration from the University of Arizona, right?
Yeah, that's what brought me to Tucson originally, Mark, was I came here to get my degree with the plan to move to San Diego. And I'll say I was one of those guys who had to work a semester and go to school a semester. So after the 6 years it took me to get my bachelor's, I fell in love with this town. And I've never left.
There you go. Well, you're not Robinson Crusoe there, mate. There's a lot of people. You had a considerably long period with, 9 years with the Tucson Metro Chamber of Commerce, which I'm a member of. What was your role there?
I started off in governmental affairs doing lobbying, both at the local and the state level, and then I was promoted and was placed in charge of their economic development and international trade programs. And then my last 4 years there, they created a new position just in case the CEO wanted to retire. It's called Senior Vice President. So my last 4 years were pretty much running the place, doing administration.
Wow. Well, that would have been, a heck of a commitment, wouldn't it? To run
It was a lot of fun. It really was. And that's really where I cut my teeth in business. And it was sort of nice. It's kind of like drinking from a fire hose, but you're dealing with so many businesses from, small businesses to major corporations and doing international trade and making, recruitment calls on companies to get them to come to Tucson. So it really was a joy. But that's something we'll talk about. Those were very different times.
My word.
Mark. Yeah.
Very much so. So then tell me about RONIN, the business services, if you'd like to.
Well, when I was ready to, they put me in that position to replace the CEO, and he, frankly, was not going anywhere, and good for him. He's one of the best nonprofit executives I've ever met. And so I started to chafe a little bit and decided it was time for me to go out and run my own shop. But I looked around, and frankly, all the jobs that I wanted were taken by very good people. There was no place to go. And so a business person that has been very successful, that I considered a mentor, told me, if you can't find a job, make a job. So I, $3,000 to buy a computer, and I started my consulting practice.
Very good. Were you drawn to the nonprofit model?
Well, to some extent, it's Mark, as an entrepreneur, you trade security for freedom. And I always liked the idea of freedom as long as you can hustle and do it. Now, most of that time I was a single man, so I didn't have a lot. I could take more risks, I would say, than somebody with a family. But I still, part of the consulting is I help with marketing, public relations. I do nonprofit management consulting as well. And then to some extent, some advocacy, some lobbying still.
Well, you started the business from scratch. It's always a buzz to do that. But was it a difficult challenge for business advocacy and public relations in Tucson back then overall, do you think?
Oh, it was much easier then than it is now, no question.
Easier then?
Oh, yeah.
Why would you say that?
Well, there were more people engaged, I would say, in the community, and that's one of my concerns, Mark. And as you know, I ran for city council twice because this community, it's like having a child can get A's in school, but the last few years seems to be bringing home C's and D's, and that's very frustrating. And just from my perspective, I don't find companies are engaged in the community as much as they used to be, and that's very troubling. I don't think that's healthy for any community.
Well, having worked at KVOI myself, an AM talk station here in Tucson, a few years on and off, I still get to listen to some of the shows that I like, and yours just happens to be one of them, Ben. Folks, if you haven't heard the show, it is titled, as we said before, American Warrior Radio. What is your overall aim of doing this show, Ben?
And I want to give credit here to Dave Sitton. Anybody who's been in Tucson any length of time remembers Dave. He was a media icon. He used to broadcast the Wildcat games, was very involved in marketing here in Tucson. Dave's the one that actually started the show. And the reason he did was because he recognized there was a growing gap of understanding between the 1% of those who serve our country in the military and all the rest of us. And that's, again, not good for society. So he started the show to communicate those stories and help bridge that gap of understanding. And Dave was just a wonderful man. He knew that I was involved in supporting the military through my other ventures, and so he asked me to send him guests that evolved into, hey, why don't you sit in on a couple of shows for me, which then evolved into asking me to guest host when he ran for Congress. And the way the story goes, Mark, I wasn't there, but Dave came in one day to do a show, and the producer said, Dave, you don't look quite right. And he says, I feel a little off, but I've got a doctor's appointment tomorrow. Well, tomorrow never came.
Well, I'll be.
Yeah, a young man. And I just felt so strongly about the importance of these messages. I approached the station and Dave's family first to get permission. And knowing absolutely nothing about radio, jumped in with both feet, and it's been a on-the-job learning process since then.
Well, you've done exceptionally well, because I'm very... having spent years of learning the craft and going through as a young man, and most of my, 40 years in radio and television is a long time. And I felt
you started when you were 5, though.
No,
so.
19. Oh, that's very kind of you.
Yeah.
Very nice. The nicest compliment I've had all day. Thank you. But, you had to do it without any pre-training, without any provincial training, none of that. You had to jump right in. Just boom, boom, there I am. And you do a good job. I mean, you care. It comes through. You have passion. You can be listened to. You're understood. Your diction's good. You're clear. You know what I mean, mate? There's a lot of worse guys than you on there, I'll tell you.
Considering it's my third language, I'll take that as a compliment. Really, what I learned, and particularly, I think one of the power or one of the things that I bring to the table, Mark, is growing up, particularly up in the jungles with the indigenous, and that year we spent with the Sioux, I really learned the power of storytelling and how that's so important. And that's what we try and achieve every week with American Warrior Radio. We're there to tell a story.
Yeah.
And that's why we spend the entire hour with just one guest, if at all possible, so we can get in, get deep into their story.
Well, I can relate to that, and that's probably why it is good. I mean, that's what you do. You tell stories of those who protect us at home and abroad, the men and women of our military and, of course, first responder communities. That's what the show's about, folks. The program currently broadcasts on 5 stations in 4 markets. And those are?
We're at KVOY in Tucson. Hopefully I get them all right. KFNX 1100 AM in Phoenix. We're on KPPF in Colorado Springs and KFBK and KSTE in Sacramento.
And do you think there'll be more a little bit later on?
Oh, that's definitely my goal this year is to syndicate the show fully nationally, Mark. I'm kind of getting up there in years, and this has always been sort of a weekend labor of love for me. Mm-hmm. And as long as it doesn't lose money, my wife's okay with me doing it. But she also said, hey, you could do a radio show from anywhere. And that might be someplace we have room for some horses and donkeys and geese. So I'd love to syndicate it. And it's really about just making sure more people hear these messages, and particularly in the environment we face in our nation right now, making sure these people hear good messages about those who protect us is so important.
Well, that's really good, and I'm glad you are, and you do a great job. Now, how did you go about getting these stations to take your show on? I mean, did you have to do a lot of convincing? Is that funny?
How much time do we have? No, I've got
as long as you want, my friend.
It makes my head explode. But right now, I'm operating under 3 different business models. The 2 of the shows are brokered, and you know that. Your listeners might not know that, but basically, I pay the station to buy the airtime. So I buy an hour airtime and broadcast my show, and then we sell advertising to cover that cost.
Yeah.
The situation with one of my other bigger stations is basically they're not charging me anything, but I get none of the advertising revenue. I'm just happy to be on the air and spreading the messages. Mm-hmm. And the third model with my newest station is kind of similar. They're not charging me a fee, and then I get a 15% commission on the advertiser. So excellent. I'd really like to standardize that at some point, but right now I'm just glad to be getting the word out to more people.
Yeah, it's interesting because I can assure you there'd be listeners who do listen to this show are going to be surprised with the fact that, you even have to pay somebody to be able to be on that particular station. And in doing so, well, I've got to cover that cost somehow. So this is where the sponsors come in.
Correct.
Now, in doing what you were doing, because, I mean, is it difficult to get sponsors for you locally, or do you try nationally? How do you go about this?
I started off all locally, obviously, because I was just on the one Tucson station. Back then it was KQTH, the FM station. But now that we're reaching broader markets, I've started selling more national advertisers. In fact, I just got a flag company that signed on board that's out of South Carolina.
Oh, cool.
And obviously our demographic is perfect for them. Mm-hmm. And so that's coming on board. So I'm really trying to work the national advertisers now as well. And then, of course, when we go to full syndication, that will be key.
My word, it will. And is it affordable? I mean, there could be sponsors interested listening to the show.
Absolutely. I'm particularly with the local advertising. I believe that now our rates are competitive with other rates that they would pay probably on some of these stations, Mark. But the key here is it's not, and that's something I love about that part of the business is it's not just selling the ads, mm-hmm. but it's educating those business people about how I can help. And it's really, if I can't help them, I don't want their business because they're going to be upset. And that's one thing I learned when I'm working at the chamber. This is the world's largest small town, and you've got to, you've got to take care of people.
I've never heard it put that way.
No, you got
I've heard 6 degrees is down to 2 degrees separation, but not that.
No,
that's a goodie.
No, it's a word of mouth town. So you've got to take good care of people. So educating them, and I think the key is over 10% of the entire population of metropolitan Tucson are veterans, active duty military, or first responders. That's a huge slice of the market,
isn't it?
And they talk amongst themselves. And veteran households earn on average $12,000 more annually than non-veteran households. There's a lot of good reasons to target that market specifically. If you're looking for a program that's going to reach 100,000 people every weekend, I'm not your buy. Mm-hmm. But if you want to target and really do it's kind of a shotgun versus a sniper rifle shot at that demographic, then I believe we provide very good value.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's good. All right. So, and anybody can contact you by how?
Email bbg@AmericanWarriorRadio.com, or, of course, they can visit the website, AmericanWarriorRadio.com as well.
All right. And we'll do that before we sign off today. We'll also go over that again in case you'd like to do that. Now, we touched on, how you first got into the radio business. There was something I wanted to ask you. What was it like living on the reservation?
Technically, we lived in Pierre, which is the city, and we just went on to the reservation to work with them. When we were in Mexico, we spent a lot of time up in the villages living with the folks up there.
Right.
So that was a little bit different. But, Mark, that's something that in fact, even today, as I drive through some of the reservations in our country, it just breaks my heart.
Yeah.
I spent 6 weeks touring India, and the level of poverty you see in countries like that is pretty rough.
Mm-hmm.
But I've never seen poverty like I saw on the reservations, Mark. And it wasn't necessarily exclusively a financial issue. It was a poverty of the spirit, is what I would call it.
Mm-hmm.
And now, keep in mind, this is years ago, but folks they seemed broken. Spiritually and mentally broken, and that's hard to overcome. And I don't mean that in a bad way, just that it was tough to get out of that rut there. But the people we did spend time with, the lead elder there of the tribe was his Native American name was Brother of All, and boy, he sure was, and what a great storyteller he was.
Yeah, I as a visitor to the country, although I've been here on and off 24 years. The last stretch has been 8. I've always never had the opportunity to go onto a reservation because I would like to be invited. You can't just go on, so to speak. I mean, but I feel how you feel in relation to that. I don't understand why there hasn't been more done on these reservations for the Aboriginal people, if you can call that is the terminology. We do at home, it's Aboriginal people.
Mm-hmm.
We've done an awful lot there, but we used to have a lot of problems at home when it comes to either they drank or they didn't drink, and if they didn't drink, they would be good horsemen, and you could hire them for cattle ranches and so on. But if they did drink, well, it was nothing. There was no life. There was no spirit at all. And they do nothing. Now, I don't see that as the same here. That's not the same way on the reservations here, is it?
Well, self-determination is the key, and that's certainly part of the American spirit. And putting on my economic development hat, I had the same reaction as you. And particularly when you look at some of the reservations or the Native American, not communities, what's the word? I mean, they're sovereign nations.
Mm-hmm.
Here, some of them are, from an economic development standpoint, are perfectly placed. We've got a major freeway. Along the corridor there, you got all the mines, we got all the trade that comes up from Mexico. They're very well positioned to do a lot of business and recruit a lot of business because, in effect, they set their own rules. When you talk about business and communities, so often the frustration, there's zoning laws and there's licensing and there's all these other headaches you have to go through.
Right.
Well, on the reservations, they could probably make that a lot easier. And to be honest with you, I don't know the answer to that question. Certainly there's great leaders out there and they're making great progress, but honestly, I don't know quite how to answer your question. It does make one curious, yeah.
Yet, but then on the other hand, as lay people, we see, look at that beautiful casino. Look at the money it's making. Oh, there's another one. And then there's another one. And they're all owned by whom?
Well, by the tribes.
Right. Where does that money go?
Well, a lot of it goes back to the people, and I would equate, as I understand it, I'm not an expert in that, but it's sort of like in Alaska. Everybody in Alaska gets a check once a year from all the oil drilling that takes place up there, whether they work in the oil fields or not.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
really.
It's kind of a sweet little deal.
And is it how much? Any idea?
Oh, I don't know. It's not a big check, but it's something. It might pay the mortgage for the month, and so a lot of that money is returned to the individual members of the nation, and then of course it does help pay for programs like the clinics and some of the other support and the schools and some of the other support things. So it's not all, they're not all putting that money, into the bank.
Well,
they're reinvesting it.
It's nice to hear that is happening, though.
Yeah.
It's very good.
Yeah.
I'm speaking with Ben Buehler-Garcia, host of American Warrior Radio on different stations throughout America. My special guest today on Tucson Means Business. He's business. Well and truly, he's business, and he does a lot of good business for the first responders and military people, and we're going to find out more about that in just a minute. Well, I hope you're enjoying this episode of Tucson Means Business. And of course, we're very grateful and very proud to have as our sponsor the 49ers Golf and Country Club, a icon tradition here in wonderful Tucson, Arizona. And my particular guest today from the 49ers is the Director of Membership and Tournaments. And his name is Casey Polivchak. Hi, Casey.
Hey, Mark. How's it going today?
It's going well. Thank you very much. I want to talk about memberships. A lot of talk about golf clubs going down and people not playing again. And we're increasing. What's happening there?
You know, the club over the last 7 years has just really made a nice big increase in membership. It's been steady, but if you look at our numbers, you know, year over year, we're definitely on the climb.
Is there anything specific that you can point the finger at for that, do you think?
Yes, absolutely. You know, we've got a new owner, and he came in and he's just revitalized the club. The club was on the verge of going bankrupt or closing when the new owner stepped in, and he's just continued to invest in the club, the facilities, the golf course, the restaurant, and he's just been a blessing for the neighborhood, the community, but definitely the members of 49er Country Club.
Well, it's quite unique. It's a beautiful course with trees everywhere for shade. And of course, a lot of people think in the desert. I mean, this particular show goes all over the place, so you never know who's going to hear it, or which country for that matter. But should they be visiting Arizona? And I've heard a lot about the 49ers Golf and Country Club. It's easy to find. It's on Tanque Verde Road, heading east out of town. Anybody can point that way. Your GPS can get it, not a problem. It's about 12,000, and you can see it because of the entry gates. Very nice entry gates there, and you'll see the club on your left, which is the Rincon Mountain Grill, as you go into the actual golf club, and then you'll find the pro shop and so on, so it's easy to find from that point of view. What would you say to visitors? We do have a lot of visitors, don't we, from the Midwest, from the North, the colder climates and so on, as we call friendly our snowbirds. Mm-hmm. Yep. What would you say to them about if they haven't been to the 49ers yet?
Okay, so 49er, I would liken it to a Midwestern-style golf course because of the tree-lined fairways. When we get our snowbirds in, if they're coming out for a golf trip, a lot of times I recommend they come play 49er if it's a warm-up round, if they haven't played for, a couple months because of the snow on the ground. The thing about it is it's tucked into the corner of the mountains out there. That's what Rincon means.
All right.
In the corner. But the golf course is, it's more traditional tree-lined fairways, elevated tees, elevated greens. It's a great golf course to play. It's not going to kill you. It's not going to, have a bunch of huge forced carryovers, desert and cactus and, It's
not what one thinks.
No, it's not.
For the desert, yeah.
You got to keep it straight. It'll challenge you that way.
You got to keep it straight. And of course, if if it talks your cork at the moment, simply go to the 49ers website, which is
49ercc.com. That's spelled out FORTYNINERCC.com.
There you go. Okay, so do that. There's some lovely photographs, great stories to look at, and it'll give you everything about the club. You can't fail. All right? We're going to be back with Casey another time. You're listening to Tucson Means Business. Okay, so Ben, I want to ask you this. What are some of the joys and tribulations of doing your own radio show?
Well, John Justice, some of your listeners may recognize him. He was the daytime host over at KQTH when I first started doing American Warrior Radio. And as I mentioned, I was learning on the job, and he was a great mentor and gave me a lot of tips. And I remember one time I came in, oh man, it's the weekend, because I'm working 6 days a week at least doing the radio show. And it's just some days like, man, I just don't feel up to do this. And one time he stopped me, Mark, he says, guess what? We get to do radio. How cool is that? And it just struck me as like, a lot of folks don't get this opportunity. So it truly is a privilege to be able to go into people's homes and their ears and share these stories. So that's the upside. Sometimes the frustration is, certainly selling the advertising is always a challenge. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad you brought that up because people don't understand that the station doesn't pay me to do the show.
Mm-hmm, that's right.
It's really the income to offset the cost comes from the supporters. So one of my frustrations, and things I've seen that have changed over the years. You know, Mark, when I was at the chamber, we had a computer, but it was, I mean, they were like 8-inch floppy disks. It was a Tandy.
Back in those days, yeah.
You'd press print and it'd take 3 hours. You know, we did everything by typewriter. There were no cell phones, no internet, but people responded. And one of my frustrations is when I'm doing sales is, you know, I'd love to have you be a yes, but it's okay to be a no. And those people who don't respond one way or the other, there's, I don't know if you'd say, and you've maybe seen it in your career, there's sort of a loss of basic business courtesy and
Courtesy,
ethic.
yeah,
And,
sure.
you know, call me back, or how hard is it to, you know, open the email, type no, press reply.
Well, it's called
You're
a commitment.
done.
Yeah, it's called a commitment. People
Yeah.
don't like to commit. You know,
Well,
it's too hard. It's you know, but that's a little bit mañana. All the wonderful sides of Tucson, I got to tell you, I love Tucson to death. But in doing business in it, which I do too every day, it can be extremely frustrating.
Yeah.
I get exactly what you get as well, and to me, it's just, you know, no courtesy.
So,
whatsoever. I don't mind you saying no, but
No.
have the courtesy to let me know,
Right,
so
right,
I can
'cause
move on to your competition.
I'd no sooner waste someone's time than their money.
That's
and
exactly right.
if you don't want me calling you 4 times a week, then just say no, and that's okay. Or say get back to me, or our budget's spent, but reply somehow. And you know, I'll never forget when we first came to the United States. You know, our first language were Spanish and German, so there was a certain language gap that my brothers and I had to overcome. And I'll never forget, I came home one day, and they wanted to put me and my middle brother in a, I don't know what the politically correct term for it is, but we weren't keeping up to speed, so they wanted to put us in special education classes.
Okay.
And that was insulting to me.
Yeah.
Because it was a language barrier. It wasn't that we weren't
smart enough.
capable.
No.
And my parents' response, they didn't sue the school, they didn't call the teacher, they didn't, you know, cause a
Right.
ruckus. They basically just told us, well, you'll just have to work harder then, won't you?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's pretty sad.
when it comes to, you know, sales, that's frustrating, but it means I've got to make 10 more calls or 100 more calls and get the job done, because I am doing it to continue to get these messages out there.
Well, you know, and it doesn't all go in your pocket. I mean, why are veterans and members of the military, do you think, so important to our communities?
Well, we talked a little bit about this off the air, and you really touched on it. The skill sets that they bring back to our communities when they leave the military are 100-fold. And there's so many things that they bring to the table. I'd love to see more of them go into politics. You're seeing some now that are kind of making waves up in Washington or in our local communities. One of my favorite guests is now the mayor of his local town. He decided to run for office and won that office, and he's doing a great job. So there's that. For certain companies, and I tell you, when you're looking to hire veterans, right off the bat, they're already trained. They know the value of discipline and the chain of command. They can pass a drug test. They're going to be there on time. They're going to put in, you know, they're going to work for you. So they're, from a personnel standpoint, they're outstanding as well. And then we do a regular feature called the Veteran Entrepreneur feature, or Vetrapreneurs, as I call them. And there's a Bottle Breacher is a local company.
Yes, I had him on a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
He does beautiful stuff, doesn't he?
Wonderful stuff. Started in his garage, and now he's just, I mean, he's employing people out there. He's doing great work.
doing
Right
great
on
work.
Optics, another company here founded by a veteran and a former Capitol police officer that's doing exceptionally well. If you take the time to look around, there's a lot of veterans who've started their own companies or employing people, and so it's just a great asset. And, of course, the first responder, that should go without saying.
Well, very much so. And I tell you now, try Nike and FedEx. There's two alone that did it. I in preparing for this show, I rang a dear friend on the weekend who's very high up in one of the, they're not headhunters, it's in one of the employment people, you know, like an Indeed or like...
Executive recruitment, that sort of thing.
That's what, yeah, that as well, but... ZipRecruiter as an example.
Okay.
All right. And I said to him, look, I want to understand something. You're in this business every day. You're talking to businesses all across America, top Fortune 500, 200, whatever. When you're dealing along the auspices of trying to employ a vet, you know, not a veterinarian, a veteran from military, what are the biggest concerns or downside that you get? And I expected him to say more than anything that, you know, they weren't qualified enough, or it might have been a drug-related issue, or, you know, how much of it was really they might shoot themselves later. You know, sad as that may sound, the depression factor of coming out of the military, this and that. You know, it wasn't what I thought. It was more along the lines of, I don't know if I've got the right job that would fit.
Yeah.
So what they're actually doing, I was rather pleased to hear this. You know, what needs to be more of is the right fit of the transient of the vet that's leaving the military with wonderful skills. I mean, it's ironic. I'm you know, hey, I'm a vet. I can fly a $60 million jet.
Yeah.
But you won't hire me.
Right.
Because I don't have what you want. Well, really, you should have been speaking to somebody who does want what you've got.
And that's something where I really believe veterans can step up and help other veterans because they get
totally
it.
agree with you.
And Mark, you touched on something that is one of my favorite frustrations in doing the radio show, this inaccurate picture of the broken veteran.
Yes.
The idea that just because someone saw combat, they're somehow damaged goods. And as you said, they're just going to snap one day. And that is so inaccurate. And I've had so many vets on the show. Roger Staubach, or you're probably too young to remember, but, you know, Heisman winner, couple Super Bowl rings, very successful in the real estate business after that.
I know the name.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, he volunteered to go to Vietnam. He already had an NFL contract, but he volunteered to go to Vietnam.
I remember reading that story. Yes,
And,
I may not have grown up here in all the years, but over the years, different things have come across, and I think I do remember that one. As I also remember the quarterback that was paid $30 million never to play or something. You remember that one?
That's the job I keep looking for.
There you go.
Yeah,
you know,
give me $30 million. You know,
unbelievable, unbelievable.
But
you know, in Australian rules football, Ben, just intervening there, our top guy's lucky to get $1 million. This isn't soccer or rugby. This is Australian rules football. No padding, no nothing, and they're lucky to get $1 million. I mean, you know, you got guys just for not turning up, you still get $30 million.
Well, but did you get a sneaker contract? Well, you know.
So, my friends, you never served in the military yourself or wore a badge. Why are you so ardent in your support?
For precisely that reason. I consider it my duty to support those men and women who've done that because I never had to. I never had to worry about it. And
now, when we talk about first responders, share with my listeners, please, whom are we talking about?
Law enforcement, local, regional, federal, firemen, paramedics, nurses, those types of groups, those are the folks that protect us. And we've had a lot of, there again, because of the nature of the show and the markets we're in, we tend to touch more on federal law enforcement. We've had a couple Secret Service agents on there. We've had...
it is diverse, I'll say that about your show, you know.
Yeah, postal inspectors, which people don't know much about, CIA, Border Patrol, ATF. One of my favorite, ask me what my favorite guest is. It's kind of asking, who's your favorite child? It's hard to answer, but we had the Netflix series Narcos, if anyone saw that.
Oh, yeah, I've watched it. There's about 3 versions,
Yeah, well, the original
I've seen them all
version,
5 times.
The original version with Colombia, I had the 2 original Narcos, Javier Peña and Steve Murphy that the show was based on.
Peña,
and what a great interview, those guys, and just the stories they tell. And
well, your background, look, growing up and where you traveled, did you see much along those lines?
No. Not that was, again, those are different times.
Different times.
So
Fair enough.
Well,
it's pretty bad today, though, isn't it? Still.
Oh, it's
the war
awful.
on's a giggle, isn't it? Really.
It's
you know what? Something. Let's discuss. Go off left field here a little bit, shall we? Because I feel like I can talk with you about this. I see these. This business in Afghanistan for so many years. Our boys going down. Yes, I understand that. They're going to get back in. They're going to treat women the way they've always treated women, and lots of other bad things as well. And yet, here we are at our own border, America, in the being abused with the immigration scenario, yet you feel terribly sorry for the immigration scenario, and you would like to help. You'd like to do something about it, but there are druggies coming through as well.
Oh, no.
There are seeds being planted so badly in America through the the border problem. You agree with me on that?
Let me tell you a quick story along the lines.
Please do.
One of the joys of doing this radio show is I get to experience a lot of things that your average civilian might not be able to. And so got the opportunity to go out and spend a day with the Customs and Border Protection ground forces, as well as go up with their air and marine helicopter unit and spend a day with them. And boy, that gives you a whole different perspective. When I was with the ground unit, we were 20 minutes out of Nogales. We're coming up over a hill mark, and I see down there 5 people sitting in a circle. And it almost looked like it was a family having a picnic, but it was 9 o'clock in the morning. Mm-hmm. The minute they saw the vehicle, they stood up and waved us down and basically surrendered. These were 5 Chinese nationals, 3 men and 2 women, all scratched up. They had maybe a third of a liter of water on between them, and they basically just they're 100 yards inside the border and were giving themselves up. And it was the Border Patrol agent. He couldn't take them into custody because he had me with him, but he went into his lunch pail and took out his water and his Gatorade and gave it to him and called for another unit to come pick them up. So it was a very compelling humanitarian moment. But at the same time, I'm thinking, wait a minute, if 5 Chinese nationals can just saunter across the border,
just like that,
what about bad guys? And you're talking about human smuggling and drugs. And,
of course.
And the Laredo sector, I think last week they arrested 5 MS-13 gang members in 7 days. And I just had a guest on the show, and we were talking about human trafficking. And all these, 46,000 unaccompanied minors that are now being held in our facilities, that's a real tragedy. What's going to happen to those children? And it's not beyond the scope of potential that some of these bad guys might be onto that. And they come in and say, hey, I'm, so-and-so's uncle or third cousin.
Well, this is what the issue is. They ring a number when you get here. Supposedly it's your uncle, this and that. And there's a lot of stuff goes on that, the average person doesn't realize or understand what's going really on. And, the heart comes out of the this and the that. And then later on, we're sick to death of the druggies and we're sick to death of the cartels. I would love to send the Army and the Marines and God knows who else we've got into those countries, clean up those cartels if you could, so that these poor devils can stay in the homes where they truly want to be.
Yeah.
The families can. They wouldn't have to split them and put them apart and all the other misery that goes with it. You can't help feel sorry, but you're also not the police of the world from a point of view or the, I don't know. It just it's such a frustrating deal. Wonder why politicians walk away from it. Too hard to handle.
Well, you're spot on. The answer to this problem is in their home countries. And it's not something. Last season there was 2 hurricanes that completely destroyed a lot of these towns and villages. Well, there's no more work. Work was hard enough to come by in some of these countries before COVID. Now it's probably 100 times worse. And you're right. I don't know if people saw that video of those 2 infants being dropped over the border wall, and it does break your heart. And imagine being a parent who gets to a point where they believe that the only future for their child is to take them up here, dump them across the border, and hope they do well. I mean, that should break everyone's heart.
Yeah, I know.
But the solution is on the other side of the border. It really is.
Do you think in our lifetime, Ben, that we'll see something done about that? Well, I'm referring to America intervening, putting our strength over the border into these countries and literally going to war with the cartels, cleaning them up.
This maybe comes back to another point we touched on. That's where I'd like to see more veterans run for office, because we really need courageous leadership, people to make those hard decisions. And there's hard decisions that have to be made. And yes, it breaks your heart that, these families may not be able to get across the border, but those are tough decisions that these folks make, in some cases every day in their career. And frankly, for the good of the overall country and maybe for those people as well. But yes, I'd like to see more investments. And let's talk about Mexico, Mark. Having grown up there, they've got oil resources. They're some of the hardest working people you'll find anywhere in the world.
That is true.
Tourism down there should be like making money. There's absolutely no reason that country shouldn't be a first world economy.
Well,
but for lack of
I'll tell you something. I used to love going down to Puerto Peñasco, good old Rocky Point. I mean, I'm from Australia, surrounded by beautiful oceans. I miss the water. I miss the oceans. I love Tucson, but I'm in a desert. Oh,
Well, we got plenty of
You
beach.
go to San Diego. Oh, yeah. You can't even go in. It's that darn cold. But here's the reality. You should be able to go down to Puerto Peñasco without a worry in the world. But I can tell you now, my wife, who's a Tucsonan, born and bred, and all the road trips they used to do down there and so on, she will not go down there anymore. At the way things are right now, she will not go down there. And I'm trying to tell her, come on, we got friends that go down all the time, this and that. Then you pick up the paper and that thing happened in the family.
Right.
I mean, I don't know what to believe anymore. I don't know whether to trust it, risk it, not risk it, what to do.
Yeah.
But I'd love to go down there more, spend my dollars, help out the locals.
And that makes it even harder for the folks on that side of the border. Last time I was in Nogales, it broke my heart. I mean, probably 50-60% of those stores are closed. On
Nogales
the
used to be great for shopping, didn't it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And now, thank goodness for the medical tourism. That's probably what's keeping them alive down there.
Yeah, right.
But, easy for us to say we're sitting here in the
but
comfort
again,
of America.
it's the old cartels, but just a touch on it. Not that, it's anywhere near as bad as some of the cities in Mexico, but nevertheless, there was gunfire and there was people killed and there's been people abducted, and that shouldn't be.
No, and that's something that you'll see. In fact, again, my last guest, who 20 years with ICE and Customs and Border Protection, he said something that was very chilling to me, Mark. He says, I want your listeners to know that there is evil in the world, and there's evil men that see human beings as a commodity, and they'll buy and trade and sell them. It's easier to, you make more money off a human being than you do off of drugs, because it's almost like the gift that keeps on giving. And that is frightening and sad. And, we all need to be aware of that so that we can put pressure on the folks who can do something about it.
I don't like getting into politics, but, I'm impartial, number one. So we're talking about the border wall. You've seen a bit more and understand that it was only part of a plan, wasn't it, really?
Correct.
Right? And it's a shame it never got finished. But, they're burrowing underneath already, putting ladders over the top already. But it's not the end all and be all, was it?
No. And really, the strategy of the border, you can't, and boy, that's something I learned when I was flying up there in that helicopter, particularly when we got over the reservation. There is some rough country out there. And, I mean, we're talking maybe a 3-strand barbed wire fence is what comprises the border wall out there.
As it stands, right?
But you can't, just geographically and financially, you can't build a wall across. We're talking 1,900 miles of border. That's the equivalent of driving from Washington, D.C. to Salt Lake City. Ugh. It's a huge stretch of line. But the strategy is to put the wall up in places where you can funnel the traffic into areas where you can use manpower and technology and drones and infrared sensors and all those things to control it. So it is sort of not a stopgap, but it's a funnel strategy, and that can work. But they're overwhelmed. Mark, they are completely overwhelmed.
Yeah, and that does concern me. What do you say? Do you think they need, another few thousand?
Certainly, well, they're doing a campaign right now to hire more personnel, but it comes back to what we've touched on in our conversation before. It's the perception, your wife's perception. Are things really as dangerous in Mexico as she thinks they are? Most likely not. But the perception is that it is, so therefore she doesn't travel. The perception down in Mexico and Colombia and Venezuela and some of the Latin American countries is that if you can just get across the border, then your chances of getting citizenship are pretty good. There are 300,000 asylum cases right now sitting in the courts that haven't been addressed yet.
I know.
So it is manpower. We probably need to hire more judges to adjudicate those cases and get some resolution one way or the other. But we also, we need to help them fix the problems, because you're so right. They don't want to divide their families. They don't want to leave their homes any more than we do.
Not if they could wave the magic wand, and why should they? But I'm also concerned, Ben, and no one wants to touch it, talk about it, or, mate. You talked about Chinese potentially coming in. Now it's known, even apparently, between, some pretty bad terrorists, if you like.
Right.
That one of the easiest ways now to get into America is just come through Mexico.
Just wander across, sure.
You know what I mean? And all the stuff we've been through, and the boys that have put up their lives over there on their soil.
And keep in mind, and that's something that does chill me every day too, particularly when I talk to these experts. But keep in mind, some of these bad guys
and girls too. I'm sorry,
sure.
You know, sometimes I get in trouble for not mentioning that. I'm not sexist.
They may not have got a criminal record or have done something in their home country to have shown up on our radar.
Right.
So even if they get stopped by immigrations and customs enforcement, they're not red flagged. So they just go into the asylum system like everybody else, when really they're sort of sleeper agents. That's what they're here for.
Well, that's it. That's it in a nutshell. And all those that, come on now, let's make them all legal and everything's fine, blah, blah, blah. You know, okay, you're not going to tell me there isn't a percentage in there that are sleepers, that all this time are just waiting. And that's the part that, you know, what are you going to say? What are you going to do then, Marky? You want to send everybody back? You want to send 1 million back? What would you do, Ben?
Do you?
If you could make the decision. No, I'd want to sort them out better.
Yeah. Well, I think
that's what I want to do.
So a couple of things, just from my perspective. Nations have borders. That's a geographic fact. And any nation in the country, not just ours, if they don't maintain their borders, they can lose their sovereignty. So that's number one. I understand we have to have limits because we are the land of plenty, but we can't feed and employ the entire world. So to me, Mark, it should be pretty basic. Set up satellite offices down in these countries. You show up. I want a blood test to make sure you don't have hepatitis or something else we don't want to come in. We're going to do a criminal background check to make sure you're not a bad guy or whatever else we need to do. Get a sense of your skill set to know that you can be employable in the United States. And then lastly, let us know if you have a relative here in the States that can support you. And then let's get the process going. The system is broken.
Would these countries that we're referring to now, would they work with the U.S.? Because that's a great idea.
That's a very interesting question because there's a certain sense of national pride, and I'm sure it's kind of galling to the leadership in some of those countries, not all of them. Some probably don't care that they're losing their citizens or leaving their country to seek a better opportunity.
Well, they can't even handle the cartels.
Well, and that's the answer to
I mean,
question.
It must be horrible. You're not sure whether you're going to get home to your family at night. If you're in a role, in a political role, or if you're in a leader's role, in the community, because the cartel will get you if you don't just say yes and buckle down and do as you're told.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying, that, man, I don't see any other way but force. It's almost like going to war, in a foreign country, for the right reasons of all the wars we've fought before. And this is human deprivation. This is treating people or killing them if they won't join, or killing their kids or educating their kids, how to hold a Russian rifle and kill like they do in the Middle East.
I just want to go on the record, Mark, that neither Ben Buehler-Garcia nor American Warrior Radio endorses an invasion of Mexico.
Oh, okay.
But you know
what I mean. But I love that idea of yours. Little satellite places all right through to do it cleanly, openly, nicely. Come on in. Let's see. The latest stats of those that just came over the border with COVID.
550,000 encounters at the southwestern border this fiscal year, and it really it's common sense. If we're trying to fix our entire immigration policy out of whole cloth at one go, that's a fool's errand. Let's find the parts that are broken, like the courts. Figure out how we fix that. Okay, bang, we've got that done. Let's move on to the next one and do it a bite at a time where it's more manageable. And that's a lesson you learn in business too. My word, it is. Absolutely fantastic. Ben Buehler-Garcia. And the show is called AmericanWarriorRadio.com. That's the actual website to be able to get hold of Ben should you want to write to him. The show is here locally in Tucson on KVOI, 10:30 a.m. on the dial. And what time again? Saturdays from noon to 1. Yeah, that's right, noon to 1. Saturdays live, if you'd like to listen to it. And, of course, they've got podcasts after that. You can. But in other stations, again, let's just reiterate on those around the country. So I'm in Phoenix, Colorado Springs, and 2 stations in Sacramento. There you go. So if you're visiting and you're from any of those places, you can hear him there as well. But you don't have to tune in. We've got over 250 podcasts. And that you talk about how business has changed, Mark. Oh, yeah. Back in the old days, you had to get in the car or in your office and turn on the AM radio. Nowadays,
That's the phone.
70% of my downloads right now are going to people's mobile devices, and that's something that I'm trying to adjust to.
Yeah, it is. It's weird to think of it, but same as mine and same as through our network. It's the same thing. Facebook.com/American Warrior Radio. Also, for those, and there's Twitter, of course, and LinkedIn. You can check up on Ben Buehler-Garcia, Buehler. Okay, Ben Buehler-Garcia. It's been a privilege and a pleasure, mate.
Mark, thanks for the opportunity, and keep doing what you're doing.
It's while I try to help local business, that's part of our model here, and they have their shows, and I help them produce the shows and teach them as much as I can, and then they love hosting their shows and doing them. And now, of course, we're going out to more and more platforms, and then I'm going to video as well, which is what people want. So
I'm glad I came in before you did video. I've got a face for radio, trust me, folks.
Thanks to our sponsor, 49ers Golf and Country Club. Very loyal, been with me 3 years now. And listen, the club is open for fun and pleasure. The golf is happening, and the course is, it's not summer yet. It's in good nick. Go and play some golf, and of course the Rincon Mountain Grill. And then the gym is open for people. There are rules with that, but things are coming back a little bit, slower than normal, but we're there for business, and they're very friendly, and they'll look after you. Go and find out things. Okay, and go to their website, too, if you want to, at the 49ers Golf and Country Club. Thank you again.